It is my pleasure to introduce to you the Honorable Matt Weintraub, District Attorney of Bucks County. Thank you, Matt, for coming out to talk to us today. I understand you're a very busy man supporting our community.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Anthony. Thank you for having me.
So you were asked to come here today to talk about the opioid epidemic. Can you give us some examples how that epidemic is destroying our community here?
It's really pervasive, Anthony. To give you a specific example, we had a homicide by vehicle case in which the person that was driving the car was impaired. They had used heroin, and they killed an innocent person in another car. Not only did that family sustain a terrible loss, but the driver of the car that had used the heroin is now in jail for an awful long time in state prison.
That's awful. You know, our students unfortunately do make poor choices. We always associate those poor choices with our older students, the younger adults. Is this true? Is this a safe assumption?
It's a fair assumption, but it is not limited. This scourge, this epidemic, knows no age boundaries. In fact, I recently heard a statistic in which in Bucks County, in the fatal overdose population is predominantly white males in their 30s. But you shouldn't take away from that they're the only ones. No one is immune, and where it starts, as you know, is at a very early age, sometimes with prescription practices. We've just become immune to saying no or asking for alternative prescriptions, and we turn to these narcotics, which can lead to addictions.
Right. What is really alarming is I just read the paper last week, and they talked about 3 deaths here in our backyard, Pendel. And as a teacher, I know too many students who have lost their lives to opioids and so forth. And I always question myself, say, what could have I done? What could have I looked for? So today, what are some things we as teachers can look for in terms of how can we help these students?
Well, a couple things. I think that's a two-pronged question. So the first thing that I would say are some of the telltale signs that you can look for, and I'll address teachers who are also parents. You want to look for aberrant or different behavior. If a student that you've known at least for part of the year or for that his or her career behaves one way normally, and all of a sudden they're behaving a different way, maybe they're becoming more withdrawn, or they're hanging out with a different friend set, or you're seeing more and more absences, those are all telltale signs that something is not right. If your spidey sense is tingling, you have to trust your instincts. You've all been teachers and administrators for millions of years collectively, not just you, Anthony. You need to trust your instincts. Another great, just very practical, down-the-earth thing to look for is if a kid is taking a lot of bathroom breaks, if they're asking for that hall pass a lot of times, or if they're asking to be excused because they don't feel well, or frankly, if they don't look well, if they have an ashy color or their lips are turning blue or they're nodding off in class, these are just all telltale signs that something is not right, and oftentimes it's because of an addiction problem. You asked me also about what can we do.
Right.
Well, number one, it starts with education in the home, certainly. I think a lot of times our parents tend to over-rely on teachers and administrators to serve as a cure-all and a watchdog. I don't think that's fair. So I think that we have to reiterate that any education that we give in the classroom has to also be emphasized by saying, kids, you need to talk about this with your parents, with your brothers, with your sisters, because it has been proven that the more that we talk about this and communicate about it, the less likely somebody is to be ignorant to how quickly an addiction can start. Another thing that we can do, and I understand that the Neshaminy School District certainly has taken advantage of this, is if you know somebody at risk, you need to be able to carry Narcan. As we say, heroin and opiates kill. Narcan saves. It's not a cure-all, but it certainly is an antidote. And I brought a sample, and hopefully you'll get to demonstrate that on the air in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
It's for free.
Yes.
On Mondays or Tuesdays down at Bucks County Drug and Alcohol Commission, which is in Warminster on Lewis Drive. You watch a little video, you leave with 2 doses, absolutely free, and you're prepared to save a life.
What really concerns you the most about this epidemic?
A couple of things really concern me. Number one is how widespread it is, of course, but that concerns everybody. But the second thing is that I think that people still feel really stigmatized about it. And what I mean by that is somebody may be suffering. Nobody chooses to become an addict or addicted to pills or heroin. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, hey, I think I'm going to become a heroin addict. So we need to really be proactive in our support of not only the students, but the students who may have somebody in their family that's suffering from this type of addiction. And I think that the best way to handle that is for us to educate them and to make sure that they understand that it should be destigmatized. Another thing that I always like to stress is we need to be accessible. And when I go around to the various schools and make these presentations, and one and done is not going to cut it, that education component has to be constant and it has to start early. But I always stress it's okay to go to a friend. It's okay to be a friend if you know your friend is in trouble, or go to a coach or your choir director or your priest or somebody that you trust, a guidance counselor, a teacher. These are great resources for you, and oftentimes you can do this confidentially and anonymously, and that's what we recommend. Bucks County participates in a medication take-back program better than anybody in the state. And to tell you what I mean, I'm about to make a very educated guess that everybody in the audience keeps their medications in their medicine cabinets, their kitchen cabinets, on their countertops, in their pocketbooks, or in their cars. And if I know that, that's not because I'm a genius, that's because it's logical. But if I know that, somebody that's suffering from drug addiction that needs those medications, that cannot live without them, they're compelled to take them, they're going to find a way to get into your medicine cabinets or in your kitchen counters and take those medications. They can't resist. The reason I bring this up is if you have a loved one in your house that you know is suffering from addiction, you got to keep your medications locked up. I'm not telling you not to have them there. But here's the second and equally as important point that I want to make. When you're done with your medication, you can't keep it in the house anymore. If it's old, it's expired, or even if you didn't use the entire prescription, you have to get rid of it. This epidemic is literally a matter of life and death. And what we've seen is a predominant widespread abuse of opioids, which includes heroin, it includes pills like Percocet, it includes the worst one that we've seen right now that's being abused is fentanyl. These are very, very quick acting, and they can cause fatalities really quickly. If you know somebody that is suffering from substance use disorder, particularly opioids, you have to carry Narcan. This little atomizer here, this is an inert version, this is a tester, but I'm about to demonstrate something for you. If you have a loved one or a neighbor or a close friend that's suffering, you carry this with you. And then you should watch a quick video, but even if you don't, it's this simple. You put this up their nose if they're overdosing. Congratulations, you just saved somebody's life. Wow. And here's the other good news. Let's say they're not overdosing from opioids. In fact, we had a real life example where somebody was presumed to be overdosing and they were just asleep. And somebody administered this. It has no harmful effect and it can't be abused. So really, really emphasize here the need for this if you have somebody in your circle that may be suffering. And I understand that you carry this in your school. Your nurses carry it?
We sure do. All of our secondary schools, middle schools, and the high school, we have them in our health suites for just an emergency.
I commend you for that. That's excellent.
Thank you. So one would need to be a Good Samaritan to carry one of them. Can you talk about the Good Samaritan law?
The legislature made a determination, rightfully so, that it's more important to save a life than for us to lock everybody up for mere possession of drugs. And where this comes into play, as Jan and I were talking about it during the break, is let's say a bunch of our young people are at a party, and unfortunately somebody is suffering from an overdose incident right then and there. It used to be everybody was afraid to call 911 because they didn't want the overdosing person, the victim, to get in trouble, and they themselves didn't want to get in trouble. Legislature passed this law that enables us to have Narcan, and also, if you call 911, you're honest and cooperative, neither you, the caller, nor the overdose victim will be arrested.
That's great news. That really is good news. You know, as a parent, sometimes we really want to help our children, and we can't. Sometimes we can't even get them the help we know that they need. We talked a little bit about Act 53. Can you tell us more about Act 53?
I'm glad you asked me about that, Anthony. Act 53 has actually been on the books for quite a while, but it was not a very streamlined process, and I'm going to break it down in a nutshell and tell you how you can access it as a parent. It pertains to minors from the age of 17 up to a day less than 18, all the way down to, we'll call it 11 years old. And if you know that your child is suffering from an addiction, and this can be an alcohol addiction too, alcohol or drug addiction, but they will not cooperate and get treatment, you can now use Act 53, and we have the forms on our website, on Bucks County Drug and Alcohol Commission's website, and on the county website. It's a couple of forms that you fill out. You put them into the court at the courthouse,
Okay.
the Justice Center, and you'll get a hearing within 1 week. And your child will have to answer to a judge who's going to then order them to get an assessment right then and there, and the whole process takes less than a week. And what we found is that once the child gets up to court, they almost all agree to go for treatment. And I would say that is close to 100%.
Wow.
And we've had probably between 30 and 50 young people take advantage, and hopefully we've saved some lives by doing
You
that.
had to have. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then the ripple effect of those other lives that you may have saved, or just being at ease as a parent or a grandparent or even a brother or a sister.
And I'd like to editorialize on this Act 53, Anthony, if I could for a second. The majority of the cases where the parents have taken advantage of the process
Yes.
have been when their kids are addicted to marijuana.
Wow.
But the kids have acknowledged that they had a problem and have sought treatment. So nobody is immune, as we know, regardless of social stature or economic class, and no drug is immune from abuse.
That is great to hear. And the fact that you did bring up marijuana, I just want to say that it is not a rite of passage. It is an illegal substance, and it messes with young people's minds, and it's not to be taken as a joke either.
I agree with you. I think that we're becoming a little bit numb to marijuana because of the trends in the other states. But you're right, number one, it's still a huge health risk, and number two, and not least important, it's illegal.
Yes.
You don't want to mess around with it.
Great. Well, Matt, again, thank you for your time. It was really nice seeing you today. I hope you have a great weekend.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me,
All right.
Anthony.